And this time, in today's webinar, we are going to overview why Shakespeare matters and why and how you should use his plays and how you can approach his plays in the classroom. Whereas next week we will talk about emotions, but that's a different webinar that you might want to join. So today we will start with a kind of Helbling approach to reading Shakespeare in the language class, and then I will unpack all these ideas and show you some examples from our two latest Shakespeare books. Let me do this here. So you might be familiar already with our titles. We have Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, Hamlet, Twelfth Night, and Othello. And today we will concentrate on the last two. You can check these out on our website if you'd like to know more about the previous three titles. All right. So we will start with a little bit of warm-up and introduction, and then I will share the Helbling approach to reading Shakespeare. And I will share some ideas about how you can integrate Shakespeare in your coursework. One objective I had when I was planning this webinar is that while you are taking notes, I'd like you to think all through the webinar about one lesson or a couple of lessons that you would dedicate to Shakespeare. And I'd like you to think in terms of ideas, like what you can take home from all this webinar, and how you could plan your own Shakespeare lesson, even if it's just only one lesson, or if you'd like to do a couple of lessons sometime this term. After a very short break, I will talk about Twelfth Night and Othello, and we will discuss why I have chosen these two plays and why you could choose these two plays. And then I focus on two key scenes in the plays. And a final task will be a very little task, which is actually the outcome of what we are going to talk about today, which is how you could plan your own Shakespeare lesson. So let's get started. All righty. So here's a warm-up idea. I don't particularly like the idea of decontextualizing lines, but with Shakespeare it's a bit different because they are so famous, all these lines, that your students might be familiar with them, and you might want to share some of these with them. And it's a nice little introduction to any Shakespeare lesson, maybe. Because then if you just imagine that you pick one famous line, you start your lesson with it. It is a bit like a hook that can draw your students in, and then you can start talking about where this line appears, why it is important, how many rewritings they have heard of this line. So I think it's a nice idea to use lines to introduce it. So here I have 6 sentences, and I wonder if you can guess where they come from. Of course, they are related to the two plays that we are going to talk about today. So if you can guess 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, I help you with this much, that 1, 2, 3 belong together, and 4, 5, 6 belong together as well. So if you want to write your guesses in the chat, that's one way to do it, or you can just guess for yourself. I give you a little time until I see some answers. I see that some of you are still struggling with hearing me, but I hope you can resolve it soon. So yes, the first 3, I see a lot of answers are coming in. So the first 3 lines are from Othello, and the second 3 were from the Twelfth Night. I think even if you are using these at the end of a lesson can be a nice idea, because it's not just for comprehension check, but it's a good way to retell a scene or retell any kind of situation that happened in the play. So yes, work with famous lines. That's my first advice. Then here's another one. Maybe your students already know, and when I'm talking to you, I also imagine how you would be working with your own students. So we are doing a little double act here. So when you are working with a play, I'm sure that even if students don't know the plays in detail and they don't know the whole plot, probably they have heard about these plays and they will have some kind of idea about them. So which is the one word that you would associate with Othello, and which one word would you associate with Twelfth Night? It would be nice to see how you hero jealousy. Yes, that's a very strong theme here. Murder, envy. And you see how this can be a really good starting point for any lesson that you run on Shakespeare, because the moment you start engaging your students and activating any kind of background knowledge, because what we are actually doing here is background knowledge activation, and the moment they share any kind of abstract concept like jealousy, or what you are saying, passion, appearance, and deception, or yellow stockings, which is, I think, a brilliant association. I love that. And garden and all these, yes, and also the binary opposition of whiteness and blackness. I'm just reading out what the couple of comments that I can see. So the moment you start opening up these abstract ideas, you have talking points, and I think it's important to dedicate time to ask what students remember, even if these are just words they remember, or even if these are just some kind of memories of these scenes and of these plays. Because the moment they start thinking about it, they will be more drawn to actually reading the plays, and they will realize, and you realize, that Shakespeare is cool because his themes are so universal that they never run out of fashion. So yes, these are the words that we collected for Othello and Twelfth Night: outsiders, jealousy, betrayal, revenge, race, justice, gender, public or private persona. And for Twelfth Night, you can also talk about love, gender again, ambition, identity, appearance, reality, deception, class, and madness. I think that identity is a really strong theme in both plays. And that's one theme that's probably really important for teenagers as well. So there you can start really talking about and approach the whole plays, or the two plays, from a distant perspective, and then go closer and closer to the text themselves. Because once you manage to contextualize the plays, students will feel more comfortable reading them and talking about them. So we said before that Shakespeare is relevant because his themes are universal, and it's also important that there are many perceptions of his works. And I will show you a little graph in a minute, which will help you understand what I mean by having different perceptions of his work. But his plays are perceived both as high culture and something untouchable, and it's something that's really distant and difficult. But at the same time, it's also fun. There are also film adaptations, and then he's also in our language and even in translation, and we use his phrases probably every day. And in English, he uses words invented or introduced by Shakespeare every day. So, of course, he's relevant. The cultural reference here again is important, as I mentioned before, because he is both in the canon and he's both in modern day adaptations, and his texts still live, and he's not a dead author at all. Even if the author is dead, he is not a dead author. The linguistic reference is important here for two big reasons. One is that when you read his plays, we need to admit, and I think we all know, that his language can be really difficult to understand. But if you focus on a piece of text or just a scene from a Shakespeare play, and you really analyze it and you do a close reading of a text, it will raise language awareness in your students, both from the perspective of vocabulary and for grammar and syntactic reasons. So I think you put in a lot of energy, but you gain a lot as well. There's a second reason for this linguistic reference that I think it's important, is what I said about his words are everywhere in modern day English. So if you read any play, you will realize that sometimes I'm surprised about how modern his lexical pool is. So that's really interesting. From a completely different perspective, not a language related one, it's about emotions, and that's the main topic of our next webinar, is that he puts feelings under his looking glass, and he does a really serious psychoanalysis of human emotions, and it can, by understanding, if we understand our feelings, and if especially teenagers get the chance to talk about feelings, then it can really contribute to their own emotional growth. The universality of his topics is mentioned all the time, and he is relevant for everyone. And he is like one of the best TV shows your students would ever watch. So he gives us good talking points, and he makes us realize big things and big truths about life. And he is simply entertaining and fun. So I think I have given you enough reasons to work with Shakespeare and to think about working with Shakespeare in your classroom. So this is the one graph that I wanted to share with you, and it's about making connections. I have borrowed this idea from a field of educational sociology, actually, called legitimation code theory, because if you see, you will see the horizontal line represents any kind of time that goes on in a lesson or in your term. And then even if you just plan a lesson, you can think about time in this way, and you can think about concepts and words and ideas that you want to teach, the vertical line. So what happens here is that usually we understand, we introduce Shakespeare something on a high level, like it's abstraction, it's philosophy, it's high culture. That's where students arrive in the Shakespeare class, and they think that, oh, it's so difficult, it's so philosophical, and the language is difficult, and it's culturally significant, everything. So they might think that, okay, this is something that I can't understand. But what you as a teacher can do is that you start bringing it down, literally bringing it down closer and closer to reality and to the level of experiences. And this is what happens, is that when you make connections between these different levels and layers of understanding Shakespeare, then you will arrive at your students working with the text, even acting out a scene from the text or a play. And this is how it becomes their own, and it comes down to their own experience level. So I'd like you to remember this wave, because if you connect these dots, you will see a wave here that you go from abstract, and this is what you do in every lesson actually already. You go from the abstract idea, you unpack it to mid-level, and you further unpack it to concrete experiences or everyday life references or classroom activities. And you explain words, you explain scenes, you explain text to them. And by thinking of lessons, or the whole Shakespeare course you might want to teach, in terms of these waves, I think it will help you a lot with understanding how you can bring it closer and closer to your students. So remember this wave, because I will probably refer back to it at a later point. So we talked about why Shakespeare is relevant. That's good. So now let's think about how you can approach his text in the classroom. We have these, probably you have seen them already, these Shakespeare readers, Shakespeare books, because these are really rich texts and it's hard to define what they really are. And you will have an idea about what they contain by the end of the webinar. So this book takes an approach, and this whole series, to Shakespeare's text, which is both text-driven, language-focused. It focuses on diverse skills, integrates cultural knowledge, makes performing accessible, It focuses on collaboration and real life skills. It will help you with exam practice, which is still really important, I think, for most of us. And it will also give you access to lots of digital materials, which is also useful. So probably it is impossible to ask any teacher to produce these materials by just picking a Shakespeare play. So I think that having the book will help you, but also just getting ideas from the book will really help you with working with Shakespeare's text. So let's see what this approach actually means. And I will give you a couple of examples from the books themselves. So when I see that it's text-driven, I'm not saying that we are jumping right into reading a scene without any kind of preparation, because that would be simply wrong. And it's not only my experience. Research says it that going bottom up in reading in the language class is not really working, because then students feel that they are thrown in it at the deep end, and they also feel lost, maybe uncomfortable. So what we always recommend is that you approach text and difficult text from a distant perspective, and you focus on the context first, and then you focus on the actual text. You talk about the genre, and you understand what a tragedy means and what a comedy means. When we read, and when students hear that they are going to read a tragedy, they already have expectations. And when these expectations are activated, then they are more comfortable reading what they are reading. And actually activating these expectations is really fun, because in any type of text, we know how they usually go, and we know what the stages of tragedy are, or what the stages of comedy can be. So talk about these, and talk about what they think the play will be about and how it will proceed. And then you can go in and in and in, activate all sorts of contextual knowledge, historical, cultural, geographical as well. And then you go deeper inside, you arrive at an act, you arrive at a scene, and then you can do the close reading of that act or that scene. And this is what we mean by close reading, that you are like, it's an onion, and you are peeling this onion, and you are getting deeper and deeper inside it. And then you can decide, if you are a linguistic researcher, you can go as down as to the morphological level of the single words, and even the phonological level. But maybe in the language class, you want to stop at the level of the sentence and the words, and then that will be deep enough for you to arrive in the text. So when we say that it's text-driven, we say that it's language-driven, really, and we work with the text closely. We are not just talking about the text, we are reading the text, and we are working with the text. And if you see the slide here, there's an example on the left-hand side of the page. You will see an introduction and a summary of what the story was so far, which is a bit like in TV series. You always need a summary first to remember what happened before. You have some questions to predict what might happen, and some questions to activate background knowledge, or some questions to give you the chance to tell students about what they should already know. And then you have the text itself, like here it's Act 1, Scene 3. You will see an icon, which means that you can listen to this scene on your phone. If you download the Haveling Media app, then you can access, with a code, you can access this the audio recordings. And on the left-hand side, you have the original text, and on the right-hand side, you don't have the translation, but it's more like an explanation in modern English. So that's, I think, a good idea to start either way. Me personally, I like starting with the modern explanation and this summary, because it gives you enough information to feel fine about reading the original text then. Just think about what it is like. I often ask my students to think about folk tales and read folk tales in English, or read classics, because we already know the story of Little Red Riding Hood. And when you already know the story, when you have enough knowledge and experiences about the story, then you feel so much better about reading it in a foreign language. So I'm not saying that the original Shakespeare is a foreign language, but it can feel like a foreign language to some students. So if you think that they need a little bit more scaffolding, then read the description first, make them feel safe, and then read the original, because then it will be more fun. If you feel that the original might be a bit intimidating because of the language structures or the lexical choices, then do some grammar and vocabulary exercises which will help you with Renaissance English, which is actually really fun if you check out some introductory pages in the Shakespeare books. And then you will feel even more comfortable. So you can scaffold it from both sides, from the grammar and language side, and then you can scaffold it from the understanding what's going on side, and then you can really enjoy reading the text.